I smoothed down the front of my dress, admiring the way the soft cream-colored fabric draped elegantly over my figure. At 52, I still had it, and this mother-of-the-groom dress was going to turn heads at Jasper's wedding. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a flutter of excitement. "Oh, for heaven's sake," came a sharp voice from behind me. "You can't seriously be wearing that, Susan." I turned to see Fiona, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, standing in the doorway of the bridal shop's fitting room. Her lips were curled in a sneer, blue eyes cold as ice. "What's wrong with it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jasper appeared behind Fiona, his arm snaking around her waist. "Mom, it's a bit much, don't you think? You're not the bride, you know." The way he said "Mom" dripped with sarcasm. Even after 5 years of marriage to his father, Jasper had never truly accepted me as family. "I think it's lovely," I said, lifting my chin. "Clark, honey, what do you think?" My husband stepped into view, his eyes darting nervously between me and his son. "Well, it's nice, dear, but maybe something a little less showy?" I felt my cheeks burn. "Showy? It's cream-colored, for goodness sake. It's hardly a sequined showgirl costume." Fiona laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Oh, Susan, why are you even trying so hard? You're just a placeholder, you know? A fake mother." The words hit me like a slap. I looked to Clark, silently pleading for him to defend me. But he just stood there, silent and useless as always. "That's a bit harsh, don't you think?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Jasper shrugged. "She's not wrong, though. I mean, let's be real. You're not my mom. You're just the woman my dad married after she died." I felt my carefully constructed composure crumbling. "I've been in your life for 5 years, Jasper. I've tried so hard." "Save it," Fiona interrupted. "We don't need your fake motherly act. Just tone it down, okay? It's embarrassing." I looked at each of their faces. Fiona's smug satisfaction, Jasper's cold indifference, and Clark's weak, apologetic smile. Something inside me snapped. "Fine," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You want me to tone it down? I'll do better than that. I won't show up at all." Jasper rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Susan. Just pick a different dress and—" "No," I cut him off. "I'm done trying to fit into this family. I'm done being the punching bag, the outsider, the placeholder. You want me gone? You got it." I stormed past them, still wearing the beautiful cream dress. Clark called after me, but I ignored him. As I burst out of the bridal shop onto the busy street, I felt a strange mix of pain and exhilaration. For 5 years, I'd tried to be the perfect wife and stepmother. I'd cooked, cleaned, supported, and loved, only to be met with contempt and rejection at every turn. Well, no more. As I hailed a taxi, a plan began to form in my mind. They thought I was just a placeholder? I'd show them exactly what happened when you pushed this placeholder too far. The taxi pulled up, and I climbed in, my cream dress billowing around me. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror and smiled. "Home. I've got a wedding to cancel." I stormed into our house, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed through the empty rooms, a fitting accompaniment to the rage boiling inside me. 5 years of memories flooded my mind, each one a stark reminder of my failed attempts to be part of this family. I remembered the day I married Clark, full of hope and dreams. "We're going to be so happy," he had promised. What a joke that turned out to be. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Clark's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, his pleading voice filling the air. "Susan, please, come back to the shop. We can work this out. Jasper didn't mean—" I deleted the message before he could finish. Of course, Jasper didn't mean it. He never did, according to Clark. My eyes fell on a family photo on the mantel. It was from last Christmas, Clark, Jasper, and me. We were smiling, but I remembered the argument that had preceded it. Jasper had thrown a fit about me being in the picture. "She's not family," he had yelled. "Why does she have to ruin everything?" Clark had sighed, looking away. "Son, please, just one photo, for me." I picked up the frame, my fingers tracing the fake smiles. With a sudden burst of anger, I hurled it across the room. The glass shattered, scattering across the hardwood floor. "That's more like it," I muttered, a grim satisfaction settling over me. The doorbell rang. I ignored it, but whoever it was persisted, knocking loudly. "Susan, are you in there?" It was Martha, Fiona's mother. I hesitated, then opened the door. Martha stood there, concern etched on her face. "I just heard what happened," she said, stepping inside. "Are you okay?" I laughed bitterly. Okay. I've just been humiliated by my stepson and his fiancée while my husband stood by and did nothing. So no, Martha, I'm not okay. Martha's eyes widened as she took in my disheveled appearance, still wearing the cream-colored dress. Oh, honey, what are you going to do? I'm done, I said, my voice steady. Done trying to fit in, done being the punching bag. It's time I looked out for myself. Martha nodded slowly. I understand, but the wedding? It's in 2 weeks. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Oh, I know, and I have plans for that wedding. Martha looked alarmed. Susan, what are you thinking? Before I could respond, the front door burst open. Clark rushed in, followed by Jasper and Fiona. Susan, thank God you're here, Clark said, reaching for me. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. Jasper glared at me. What the hell, Susan? You can't just run out like that. We have a wedding to plan. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man-child who had made my life miserable for 5 years, who had rejected every olive branch I'd extended. You're right, Jasper, I said calmly. We do have a wedding to plan, and I'll be handling all the arrangements from now on. Fiona's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I smiled, a plan solidifying in my mind. Well, since I'm just a placeholder, I might as well make myself useful. I'll take care of everything. The venue, the catering, the guest list. You two lovebirds won't have to lift a finger. Clark looked relieved. See? I knew we could work this out. Susan, thank you. I held up a hand, silencing him. Oh, I'm not doing this for you, Clark. Or for them. I'm doing this for me. As I looked at their confused faces, a thrill of anticipation ran through me. They had no idea what was coming. But they would. Soon enough, they'd all realize just how big a mistake they'd made in underestimating me. Now, I said, my voice steel, I think it's time for everyone to leave. I have a wedding to plan. I sat at the dining room table, surrounded by wedding catalogs and sample invitations, when the front door burst open. Jasper and Fiona stumbled in, giggling like teenagers. Dad, Susan, we have news, Jasper called out, his voice echoing through the house. Clark appeared from his study, a tentative smile on his face. What is it, son? Fiona thrust out her left hand, a gaudy diamond ring glittering on her finger. We're engaged, she squealed. And that's not all, Jasper added, puffing out his chest. We're pregnant. The room fell silent. I felt my stomach drop, the implications of this announcement hitting me like a ton of bricks. Clark recovered first, rushing to embrace his son. That's wonderful news. Congratulations, both of you. I stood slowly, plastering a smile on my face. Yes, congratulations, I managed to say, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Fiona's eyes narrowed as she looked at me. Thanks, Susan. I hope you'll be as excited about being a grandmother as you are about being a mother-in-law. The barb stung, but I refused to let it show. Of course, dear. When's the wedding? Jasper grinned. We're thinking next month. No point in waiting, right? Clark's eyebrows shot up. Next month? That's soon, very soon. We're planning to pay for it ourselves, Jasper boasted, though his eyes flickered to his father. But you know, if you wanted to chip in. I saw right through his act. They were broke, probably hoping Clark would foot the bill for this rushed wedding. Clark, predictable as ever, nodded eagerly. Of course, son, whatever you need. We're family after all. Family. The word echoed in my mind, mocking me. I'd spent 5 years trying to be part of this family, only to be constantly reminded that I was an outsider. Well, I said, my voice syrupy sweet, since we're family, why don't I take care of all the arrangements? I have experience in event planning, after all. Fiona's smile faltered. Oh, that's not necessary. I insist. I cut her off. Consider it my wedding gift to you both. Jasper and Fiona exchanged a look, clearly caught off guard by my offer. Clark beamed at me. That's very generous of you, Susan. See? I told you she'd come around. If only he knew what I was really planning. Great. I clapped my hands together. Let's start with the guest list. I assume you'll want all your college friends there, Jasper? And Fiona, your entire extended family? They nodded, looking slightly overwhelmed. Perfect. I'll need their contact information. Oh, and we'll need to book the venue, the caterer, the florist. So much to do in just a month. As I rattled off tasks, I could see the reality of their hasty decision setting in. Fiona's face paled, while Jasper's confident smirk began to waver. Maybe we should wait, Fiona started to say, but Jasper cut her off. No, we can do this. Right, Susan? I smiled, a plan already forming in my mind. Of course we can. Leave everything to me. As they left the room, discussing baby names and honeymoon destinations, I turned to Clark. "Darling, I'll need access to our joint account for the wedding expenses." He nodded absently, still beaming with pride over his son's news. I watched them all, these people who had made me feel so small, so insignificant. They had no idea what was coming. This wedding, this celebration they were so excited about would be their undoing, and I would be the architect of their downfall. As I picked up my phone to start making calls, a cold satisfaction settled over me. Let them have their moment of joy. Soon enough, they'd learn what happens when you underestimate Susan Whitaker. I sat at my desk, surrounded by wedding plans and a sense of grim satisfaction. The past week had been a whirlwind of deception. Each phone call and email another thread in my intricate web of revenge. "Susan?" Clark's voice called from downstairs. "Jasper and Fiona are here. They want to discuss the wedding plans." I took a deep breath, smoothing my features into a mask of calm. "Coming, dear." As I descended the stairs, I could hear Fiona's shrill voice. "I just don't understand why we can't see the guest list, Susan. It's our wedding, after all." I entered the living room, a serene smile plastered on my face. "Oh, Fiona, darling, I told you it's all taken care of. Don't you trust me?" Jasper snorted. "Trust you? That's rich." I felt a flicker of anger, but pushed it down. Now, I'm only trying to help. You two focus on the baby, and I'll handle the wedding details." Clark nodded approvingly. "See? Susan's got everything under control." If only they knew. I'd spent the past week systematically dismantling their perfect day. The guest list? Completely fabricated. The venue? Double booked. The caterer? Cancelled. And the best part? They had no idea. Fiona's eyes narrowed. "I want to see the contracts, Susan, for the venue, the caterer, everything." For a moment, panic fluttered in my chest. I hadn't anticipated this level of scrutiny, but I'd come too far to back down now. "Of course," I said smoothly. "I'll gather everything for you to review tomorrow. Now, how about we discuss the seating arrangements?" As I distracted them with trivial details, my mind raced. I needed to cover my tracks, and fast. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I slipped into Clark's study. His computer held all our financial records, including the wedding expenses. With trembling hands, I logged in and began creating false invoices and contracts. Hours passed as I fabricated an entire paper trail. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through the window, I had a stack of convincing documents ready for Fiona's inspection. But as I shut down the computer, a notification popped up. An email from the bank, flagging unusual activity on our joint account. My heart stopped. In my haste to create the illusion of wedding preparations, I'd made too many transactions. The bank was suspicious. I quickly deleted the email, but the damage was done. It was only a matter of time before Clark noticed the discrepancies. The next morning, I handed Fiona the folder of fake documents with a smile. "Here you go, dear. Everything you need to know about the wedding plans." Fiona flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing. "This all looks expensive." "Only the best for family," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. As Fiona and Jasper pored over the documents, Clark pulled me aside. "Susan, did you see that email from the bank? There's something odd about our account." I felt the walls closing in. My carefully constructed plan was unraveling faster than I could patch it. "Oh?" I feigned ignorance. "I'm sure it's nothing, dear. Probably just all the wedding expenses." Clark frowned. "Maybe, but I think I should call the bank just to be sure." As he reached for his phone, I made a split-second decision. It was time to accelerate my plans. "Actually, Clark," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "there's something I need to tell you, all of you." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, curious and unsuspecting. In that moment, I realized there was no turning back. The truth was about to come out, one way or another. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm that was about to break. About the wedding. There's been a slight change of plans. The morning of Jasper and Fiona's wedding dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I stood in front of my closet, bypassing the expensive mother-of-the-groom dress I'd bought weeks ago. Instead, I pulled on a pair of jeans and a casual blouse. Today wasn't about blending in, it was about standing out. As I made my way downstairs, the house was eerily quiet. Clark had left early to help with preparations, but I knew better. My husband was about to walk into the chaos I'd meticulously orchestrated. I grabbed my car keys and headed to the venue. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Jasper pacing outside, phone pressed to his ear. Fiona sat on a nearby bench, her white dress billowing in the breeze, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What do you mean you never got a booking?" Jasper was shouting into his phone. "The wedding is today?" I approached slowly, savoring the moment. "Is there a problem?" I asked innocently. Jasper whirled on me, his face contorted with rage. "What did you do?" he demanded. I smiled calmly. "I did what needed to be done." Fiona stood up, her voice trembling. "Susan, please tell me this is some kind of mistake. Where are the guests? The caterers? Anyone?" I looked around the empty parking lot, then back at their desperate faces. "Oh, sweethearts," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "There is no wedding. There never was." The color drained from Jasper's face. "What are you talking about?" "Every invitation you thought was sent, shredded. Every vendor you thought was booked, canceled. The beautiful venue you picked out, double booked for a corporate event." Fiona collapsed back onto the bench, sobs racking her body. Jasper lunged at me, but I stepped back, my hand raised in warning. "Careful now," I said. "You wouldn't want to make a scene." "Oh wait, there's no one here to see it, is there?" "Why?" Jasper's voice cracked. "Why would you do this?" I felt years of pent-up anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "Why? Because for 5 years I've been nothing but a punching bag, a placeholder, a fake mother." "Well, guess what? This fake mother just showed you how real she can be." The sound of tires on gravel made us all turn. Clark's car pulled up, his face a mask of confusion as he took in the empty lot and our tense standoff. "Susan?" he called out as he approached. "What's going on? Where is everyone?" I turned to face my husband, the man who had stood by silently for years as his son tormented me. "Ask your son, Clark. Ask him how it feels to have everything you've planned, everything you've hoped for, ripped away in an instant." Clark's eyes darted between me and Jasper, realization slowly dawning. You did this? But why?" I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed across the empty parking lot. "Why? Because you never stood up for me. Because Jasper and Fiona treated me like dirt, and you let them. Because I was tired of being the family doormat." Jasper lunged at me again, but Clark held him back. "You've ruined everything," he shouted. I stood my ground, feeling more powerful than I had in years. "No, Jasper. You ruined everything the moment you decided I wasn't worth respecting. This is just the consequences of your actions." As I watched their world crumble around them, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered every snide comment, every dismissive gesture, every time Clark had chosen silence over defending me. The guilt evaporated, replaced by a steely resolve. "So what happens now?" Fiona asked, her voice small and broken. I looked at each of them in turn, Jasper, seething with impotent rage, Fiona, a crumpled vision in white, and Clark, his face a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "Now?" I said, my voice steady and clear. "Now, we play by my rules. And my first rule is this: respect is earned, not given. You want to be a family? Prove it." As I turned to walk away, I felt the weight of their stares on my back. I knew this was just the beginning. That the real battle was yet to come. But for the first time in years, I was ready for it. Let them come. Susan Whittaker was done being a placeholder. It was time to take center stage. The aftermath of the wedding disaster was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, as Jasper paced back and forth, his phone glued to his ear. "No, you don't understand," he pleaded. "We need an extension on the payment." "The wedding, there were complications." I suppressed a smirk. Complications indeed. Fiona burst into the room, her face blotchy from crying. "They're threatening to sue us, Jasper. The venue, the caterers, everyone." I watched as Jasper's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "What are we going to do?" Fiona wailed. "We can't afford a lawyer. We can barely afford the doctor's appointments for the baby." The baby. I felt a twinge of guilt at that. No choice. But then I remembered all the times they'd mocked me, belittled me, treated me like I was nothing. The guilt evaporated. "I have an idea," Jasper said suddenly, his eyes lighting up with a desperate gleam. "We'll make a video, explain what happened. People love a comeback story, right? We'll go viral, start a fundraiser. It'll be bigger than the wedding ever was." I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound cut through the room like a knife, and they both turned to stare at me. "Oh, honey," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "Do you really think anyone's going to believe that your evil stepmother sabotaged your perfect day? You'll be laughed off the internet." Jasper's face contorted with rage. "This is all your fault," he shouted, advancing on me. "You've ruined everything." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze coolly. "No, Jasper, you ruined everything the moment you decided I wasn't worth respecting. This is just karma." The front door opened and Clark walked in, his face haggard. He took in the scene before him, Jasper's clenched fists, Fiona's tears face, my calm demeanor, and sighed heavily. "Susan," he said, his voice weary. "Can we talk? Privately?" I followed him into his study, closing the door behind us. Clark collapsed into his chair, looking every bit his 54 years. "I've been to the bank," he said. "The wedding expenses. Susan, what have you done?" I raised an eyebrow. "I did exactly what you asked me to do, dear. I handled the wedding arrangements." "By emptying our accounts," he exploded. "By canceling everything and leaving us in debt?" I leaned forward, my voice low and dangerous. "No, Clark. By showing you all exactly what it feels like to have everything you've worked for, everything you've hoped for, ripped away in an instant, just like you've done to me for the past 5 years. Clark's face paled. "Susan, please. We can fix this. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Just help Jasper and Fiona. They're expecting a baby, for God's sake." I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I taking this too far? But then I remembered all the times Clark had stood by silently as Jasper and Fiona tore me down. All the times he'd chosen his son's happiness over my dignity. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done fixing your messes, Clark. It's time you all learned to stand on your own 2 feet. A knock at the door interrupted us. Jasper burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, I've got it figured out. We'll sell the house. It'll cover the debts, and we can start fresh somewhere else." I froze. The house. My house. The one thing I had left that was truly mine. Clark looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Susan, what do you think? It could be a fresh start for all of us." I looked between them, these men who thought they could still control my life, still make decisions for me. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. "No," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "This house is mine now. You're either with me or against me, and if you're against me, well, you'd better start packing." The silence that followed was deafening. I'd drawn my line in the sand. Now it was time to see who would cross it. The tension in the house was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse through the walls. I sat at the kitchen table sipping my morning coffee when Clark stumbled in. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt rumpled. He'd been sleeping on the couch for days. "Susan," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I raised an eyebrow. "About what, Clark? How you finally realized the consequences of your inaction?" He flinched, but pressed on. "I've been thinking, what if we start over? Sell the house, split everything 50-50. We could both have a fresh start." I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the quiet kitchen. "Oh, Clark, you still don't get it, do you? This house is mine now. You're either with me or against me." His face crumpled. "Please, Susan, I know I've made mistakes, but—" A crash from upstairs interrupted him. Jasper's voice rang out, followed by Fiona's sobs. Clark and I exchanged a look before rushing upstairs. We found Jasper in his old room, frantically shoving clothes into a duffel bag. Fiona sat on the bed, her pregnant belly prominent, tears streaming down her face. "What's going on?" Clark demanded. Jasper whirled on us, his eyes wild. "We're leaving. I can't take this anymore. This isn't a home. It's a prison." I felt a flicker of satisfaction, quickly replaced by a twinge of guilt as I saw Fiona's distress. But I steeled myself. They'd made their bed. Now they had to lie in it. "And where exactly do you plan to go?" I asked coolly. "You're broke, in debt, and about to have a baby. Face it, Jasper, you need us." He lunged at me, but Clark stepped between us. "Son, calm down. We can figure this out." "Figure what out?" Jasper shouted. "How she's ruined our lives, how she's turned you against me." I'd had enough. "I didn't ruin anything, Jasper. You did that all on your own. Your entitlement, your disrespect, it all led to this moment." Fiona stood up, her voice trembling. "Please, Susan. If not for us, then for the baby, your grandchild." The word hit me like a slap. Grandchild. I'd never thought of myself in those terms. For a moment I wavered. But then Clark spoke up. "Susan, honey, please, let's work this out. We can be a family again." And just like that, my resolve hardened. "Family?" I spat. When have we ever been a family? When Jasper was calling me a fake mother, when you stood by and let it happen? No, this ends now. I turned to Jasper and Fiona. You have two choices. Stay and live by my rules, or leave and fend for yourselves. But if you leave, don't expect any help from me. Ever. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the desperation in their eyes. Finally, Clark spoke. Susan, this is our home, our family. You can't just... Can't I? I interrupted. This house is in my name, Clark. I've already spoken to a lawyer. If you want to challenge me, go ahead, but I promise you, you won't win. The look of defeat on his face was almost satisfying. Almost. Jasper grabbed Fiona's hand. Fine, we'll leave. We don't need you or your charity. As they stormed out, I felt a moment of panic. Was I really going to let them go? A pregnant woman and my foolish stepson? Clark turned to me, his eyes pleading. Susan, please, don't do this. We can still fix things. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd married, thinking he'd be my partner, my protector. Instead, he'd been my biggest disappointment. No, Clark, I said, my voice steady. We can't fix this. It's too late for that. This is who I am now. The question is, can you live with it? As I watched the conflict play out on his face, I realized this was it, the moment of truth. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd become, hung in the balance, and for the first time in years, I felt truly, terrifyingly alive. 6 months had passed since that fateful day when I'd laid down the law. The house was quiet now, almost too quiet. Clark had moved out, unable to reconcile with the woman I'd become. Jasper and Fiona were, well, I didn't know where they were, and I told myself I didn't care. I sat at my desk, poring over business plans. My old skills as a nightlife manager were coming in handy as I planned to open my own upscale lounge. It was time to reclaim my identity, to be more than just someone's wife or stepmother. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. As I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. Fiona stood there, her belly now swollen with late-term pregnancy. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her clothes disheveled. Susan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need help. For a moment, I was tempted to slam the door in her face, but something in her expression gave me pause. Where's Jasper? I asked, my voice cool. Fiona's face crumpled. He left, said he couldn't handle the pressure. I have nowhere else to go. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger, pity, vindication. But as I looked at this young woman, so close to giving birth and so utterly alone, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could turn her away, complete my revenge by leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Or I could be the bigger person, the one I'd always wanted to be but never had the chance. Come in, I said finally, stepping aside. As Fiona settled on the couch, I brought her some tea. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke. Why don't you just help us? Fiona pleaded, her hands cradling her belly. After everything, why? I took a deep breath. Because you have to earn your future, Fiona. I've reclaimed mine. Now it's your turn. She looked at me, confusion evident in her eyes. What do you mean? I said, choosing my words carefully, that I'm willing to help you. But not by simply giving you money or a place to stay. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I explained my business plans, how I was starting over at 42. If you're willing to work, to really work, I'll give you a job, a chance to build something for yourself and your child. Fiona's eyes widened. You'd do that? After everything we did to you? I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Yes, because that's who I choose to be now. Not a victim, not a villain, but someone who breaks the cycle. Just then, Fiona gasped, clutching her stomach. The baby, she whispered. I think it's coming. In that moment, all the anger, all the resentment I'd been holding on to for so long melted away. We rushed to the hospital, and hours later I found myself holding my step-grandchild, a beautiful baby girl. As I looked down at her tiny face, I realized that this was my true vindication. Not in tearing others down, but in rising above, in being the person I'd always known I could be. Clark called when he heard the news. Susan, he said, his voice tentative. I'm proud of you for helping them when they needed it most. I felt a flutter in my chest. Thank you, Clark. It means a lot to hear you say that. There was a pause. Do you think maybe we could talk about us? I looked at Fiona, sleeping peacefully with her newborn daughter, at the business plans on my bedside table, at the woman I saw reflected in the hospital room window, Strong, compassionate, unbroken. "Yes," I said finally. "I think it's time we talked. Really talked." As I hung up, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I felt hope. I had reclaimed my life, my identity, and in doing so, I'd found something I never expected: the power to forge a new kind of family, one built on mutual respect and understanding. This was my new beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next.